Investing into property but starting with just 100 rand sounds a little bit crazy to a lot of people. But actually, it is possible. And yes, it's not directly investing into buying actual land and developing it, but there's a way in South Africa that you can invest into property and be a shareholder of big commercial properties with just 500 rand. Let's talk, for example, malls, office spaces, real estate, and all of those type of properties you can think about or you can think of. You can actually invest into them with as little as 100 rand and diversify your portfolio, knowing that you are in the property space as well. So in today's episode, guys, we're talking about real estate investment trust, aka REITs. How can you invest into them? Why are they important to have in your portfolio? At the same time, looking to how can you exactly go about step by step to actually buying your first REITs in South Africa. Without wasting any time, let's get into this episode, guys. Welcome to the Student Investor Podcast with Ivan Sambo, the podcast that focuses on starting a conversation about money, investing, growing your career, and being a young person in South Africa. Our goal is to simplify the conversation so that we can all learn and grow as young people in South Africa. Hello, future millionaires and billionaires. Welcome to the episode of the Student Investor Podcast with Ivan Sambo. On today's episode, we're looking into how can you start investing into real estate investment trust, and what exactly are those in real estate investment trust, and how can they benefit you in your investment portfolio as you start building the wealth that you want. As always, guys, I truly appreciate your support and love that you're showing to this podcast. So let's continue growing it, let's continue sharing it with friends. And also, guys, don't forget to rate this podcast, whether you're using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. Rate it, give me feedback so I can be able to know where to improve and where to fix if there's something to fix about the podcast. So let's set the scene for today's episode, right? We have talked about investing into commodities. We have talked about how to start investing into shares, ETF, and all of that. On today's episode, I want to talk about investing into property, because property is one thing I always believe it gives a sense of dignity when you invest into it. Owning a piece of land somewhere, a piece of a building somewhere, makes you feel a little bit better about your investments, that you're doing something good. And today I want to talk about the simplest way that we as retail investors, we as people who are starting to invest, can invest into property as well and own a piece of land somewhere, own a piece of a building somewhere, because that will help us and shape us and motivate us to look into property development or property investment in more detail. And I was like, what's the most simplest way that we as retail investors, people with 100 rand, 200 rand, 1,000 rand, can enter the property investment space? And REITs were the answer, aka real estate investment trust. So what exactly are REITs? REITs can be simply defined by my understanding as businesses or companies that are listed in the JSE that operate within the field of income generating properties. We are talking about properties such as apartment buildings, office spaces, warehouses, shopping centers, hotel, or commercial factories. These are called income generating properties. So basically, a REIT or real estate investment trust are companies that are listed in the JSE that primarily focus on this type of properties. And when you invest into the specific companies, by law there's something that's supposed to happen. For example, those companies must pay at least 75% of their taxable income back to you as the investor who invests into these companies, right? Because they're listed in the JSE, and by requirement they must pay dividends, or not dividends, but they must pay up to 75% of their taxable income back to you, the investor, in the form of dividends. And the second thing I love about investing into REITs, especially for us as retail investors, is that we are investing into companies that are subjected to ensure that they have stable income, meaning that that stable income is always to typically try to flow above inflation or keep up with the pace of inflation, meaning that we as retail investors have a passive income coming from this businesses listed in the JSE, because they pay their rental income back to us as retail investors in a form of dividends. And also REITs, guys, by definition, by law as well, they have what they call a risk monitoring committee, basically a group of people that always monitor the risk of that specific REIT, meaning that they're trying to reduce the risk that they have and ensure that they perform very well so that you can be able to earn passive income from them. Yes, REITs also come with their own risk. Doesn't mean because they have this committee they won't come with risk. All form of investments, guys, come with a level of risk attached to it. And historically, REITs have performed very well. I can't say they have performed perfectly well, but they have proven to be good REITs as well. We have companies like Spear, Vukile, who have beautiful REITs available in the JSE that you can invest into. So now let's talk about how can you go about investing and buying your first real estate investment trust, aka REIT. I want to keep it simple. I want to keep it in a way that all of us can understand. So if you want to invest into REIT, you will need to have a broker, right? There are a lot of brokers out there that offer REITs in this country, but the most easy accessible one for all of us is Easy Equity, because it's low fee, user friendly, and you can just need to download an app and you have it on your phone and you can be able to invest into REITs. So REITs are also available in Easy Equity, but people don't typically find them and say, hey Ivan, I can't find REITs on Easy Equity. I ended up buying shares under Easy Properties. Guys, when you go to invest into Easy Equity, there's a tab that gives you categories of companies in the JSE that you can search from. You need to scroll through that tab and find REITs or find real estate in an investment trust. That's where you find REITs under Easy Equity, and you can be able to pick the one that best suits you as a retail investor. I won't do recommendation which one is the best one, because you must also do your own research and find the one that speaks to you. My favorite currently is Pierre and Vukile. I love their reels, not reels. Look at me speaking of Instagram right now. I love the real estate investment trust that they have. I buy those ones. Those are my favorites. But for you as well, you need to find the favorite that best suits you and meet up with your investment portfolio or investment type, or not even type, the type of investor that you are as a retail investor in South Africa. As I said, they are cheap, affordable, easy to access, easy to understand. At the same time, guys, they come with a lot of benefits and they're dividends driven. At the same time, they always have generating income because they earn from rent. Guys, do remember that REITs as well also come with a level of risk attached into it, meaning that sometimes a REIT company in the JSE can have property that doesn't have occupants, doesn't have people renting it, and that REITs won't be able to see profit. Sometimes because of we've seen in KZN with the looting that happened in KZN, your REIT company can have their property vandalized and damaged. So there's a lot of risks that you must take into account when you invest in specific REITs, and you need to look at where do they have their property in. Some of them have property in the Western Cape only, some of them have properties in Gauteng, Mpumalanga, KZN. So you need to look into what type of property they have, where is that property located, how have they previously performed historically as well. Look at, do they always have tenants or do they always have clients using their hotel, if it's hotel, whatever the case may be. I hope today's episode was helpful, guys. Simple and way to understand REITs, and you'll be able to share it with a friend. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Don't forget to rate the podcast, give me your input, and give me those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. As always, thank you so much. I am Ivan, especially Sambo, your students investor. I hope the conversation was inspiring and will lead you to take action to build the world that you want. As always, let's continue the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or even TikTok. I am Ivan Sambo in all those platforms. Or check out my website www.ivansambo.co.za. Thank you so much for the support and thank you so much for listening. As always, until next week.